Today, we're going to look at the engineers of the animal world, the rodents in the family Castoridae, more commonly known as the beavers. As usual, a document with the sources for the images used, along with the research papers I found useful, will be included in the description of this video. Beavers are mammals in the order Rodentia, or the rodents. This is actually the largest order of mammals, as Rodentia is estimated to contain around 40% of all known mammals. Their distinguishing feature is their incisors, which grow constantly throughout their life. This is an amazing adaptation that is extremely useful, but also comes with a severe downside. Since their teeth never stop growing, they can kill the animal if they get long enough. To prevent this, rodents need to constantly bite, gnaw, and chew to wear down their teeth and prevent them from getting too long. This is actually where the word rodent comes from. It gets its roots from the Latin rodare, meaning to gnaw. As they do this, the soft enamel at the back of their teeth is worn away faster, leaving them with very sharp, chisel-like incisors. As you might assume from their sheer diversity, rodents are one of the most successful groups of mammals on the planet. They have species that are terrestrial, arboreal, fossorial, semi-aquatic, and even some that can glide. They are found worldwide, with Antarctica and a few islands such as New Zealand as the only areas with no native rodents. However, rodents like rats and mice have become experts at living with humans, and so have managed to colonize these formerly rodent-free areas on human ships. This means that there are very few places left in the world that are completely rodent-free. So what relationships do rodents have to other mammals? They are placed in a superorder, along with the orders Scandentia, containing the tree shrews, Dimoptera, or the colugos, and the primates. This means that humans are more closely related to rats and squirrels than they are to most other mammals, which may or may not be surprising depending on your perspective. The rodents are most closely related to the order Lagomorpha, which includes the rabbits, hares, and pikas. This actually makes a lot of sense, as I've already talked about rodent teeth, and pikas and rabbits have the same characteristic, constantly growing incisors. The difference is that rodents only have 2 of these incisors, while lagomorphs have 4. While I am now going to give a phylogeny of living rodents, keep in mind that I've heavily simplified it. This is because there are so many different groups of rodents, I would need to dedicate an entire video to it. I could do that in the future, but that is not the point of this video, as I do really want to talk about the beavers today. For this phylogeny, I'm going to stick to the rodent groups that most people are at least somewhat familiar with. There are a surprising number of groups that I had never heard of, so I will be grouping these in with many of the better known species where I can. There are 2 main clades of rodents. The smaller one contains the Old World porcupines, followed by the family containing the hamsters, voles, and lemmings. Surprisingly, the New World porcupines are more closely related to guinea pigs than they are to the Old World ones, just another example of common names being a little misleading. The guinea pig family also includes agoutis, capybara, and other similar rodents. The last group in this clade contains the chinchillas and New World spiny rats, and their related families. The other major clade contains the vast majority of rodent species. It starts with the group containing squirrels, chipmunks, dormice, and mountain beavers. Note that despite the name, that last group are not the beavers we are talking about today. Mountain beavers appear to be early squirrel ancestors that are somehow still alive today. They are mostly fossorial, meaning that they burrow, but oddly for a fossorial animal are also able to climb trees, and they have many other features that seem primitive compared to other modern rodents. The beavers are in the next branch of the tree, in the family Castoridae. Interestingly, they are most closely related to kangaroo rats and pocket gophers. I am not sure what I was expecting the closest living relatives of beavers to be, but to be honest, jumping rats and burrowing gophers came as a surprise. To finish off the phylogeny, the next group contains the scaly-tailed squirrels and spring hares, then the jerboas, and finally the mice, rats, and their closest relatives. Muridae, the family containing mice and rats, is not only the largest living family of rodents, it is also the largest family of mammals with over 1,300 named species. So, let us now return to the family Castoridae, which contains the beavers and their closest extinct relatives. There are only 2 living species of beaver, and both of them are in the same genus, Castor. Many more are known from the fossil record, with over 30 different genera of extinct beaver identified. Beavers have largely been placed into 4 groups, but before going through them, I should point out that this structure needs a rework, as there is some evidence that it may be paraphyletic. That means that it doesn't accurately show the relationships between the different lineages. Still, it is a useful way to cover the main groups of beaver. First is the Castoridae. These are the most primitive beavers. They lived about 30 million years ago, but it is honestly difficult to find out much more information about them, so let us just move on. The next subfamily is Palaeocaster, or the burrowing beavers. As this common name suggests, they are more similar to the modern-day gophers, to which beavers are closely related. Unusually, they were first discovered not due to fossilized bones, but instead from their burrows, which were nicknamed Devil's Corkscrews. These were first discovered in Nebraska, and they baffled early scientists. The burrows took the form of a corkscrew-like formation of hardened earth up to 3 meters or almost 10 feet deep. These were first discovered in the 1890s, and the scientists that discovered them suggested that there might be some previously unknown freshwater sponges, as they were found in an area known as holding immense freshwater lakes 20 million years ago. People were skeptical of this, but many still believed it was some strange prehistoric vegetation. Soon it was speculated that there might be the burrows of a prehistoric giant gopher, and this turned out to be surprisingly accurate. It may not have been a gopher, but as we have already seen, beavers and gophers are closely related. The arguments about what caused the Devil's Corkscrews were finally settled when the remains of beavers were discovered in one of them. These were placed in the genus Palaeocaster. This genus excavated the burrows with their incisors instead of using their claws as most other fossorial animals do. There are different theories about why these burrows were spirals, but the most commonly accepted is that it was just an adaptation to maintain temperature and humidity within their burrow. The last extinct subfamily of beavers is Castoroides, or the giant beavers. This name may be a little unimaginative, but it is definitely accurate. The most well-known of these were the 2 species in the genus Castoroides. To give you an idea of how large these were, picture a beaver. Now picture that the beaver is as large as a grizzly bear. They were not quite as heavy or tall as a bear, but the size is still very similar, making them the largest beaver and one of the largest known rodents in North America. Castoroides could reach lengths of up to 2.2 meters or 7.2 feet. It is hard to know if they shared some of the features that modern beavers are known for, such as webbed feet or a paddle-like tail, as these are features that would not fossilize well. They are assumed to have been semi-aquatic, like modern beavers, and likely had at least webbed feet, but it is truly unknown what their tail would have looked like. They died out around 10,000 years ago. It is known that they interacted with early humans, although it is unclear if hunting was a reason for their extinction. There were also large environmental changes at the time, as the Earth was emerging from the last ice age, so the species could have been in decline anyway. The only evidence of extinct beavers cutting wood and building dams, like their modern relatives do, comes from this subfamily. Dipoides, while smaller than Castoroides, was still 3 to 4 times larger than the modern beaver. They lived in the high Arctic on Ellesmere Island in the far north of Canada near Greenland. As I mentioned in my video on camels, when we briefly mentioned Ellesmere Island and the high Arctic camel, this area had a milder climate in the past. It used to support a boreal forest as opposed to the polar desert it is today. It is from a fossil site here, known as Beaver Pond, that we get the only evidence of fossilized wood that shows signs of woodcutting and dam building by prehistoric beavers. This is not something that is easy to find, as wood requires specific conditions to fossilize well, and this only happened on Ellesmere Island due to the Arctic conditions in the peat bog. There are several things worth noting about Dipoides. Firstly, their teeth were more rounded than modern-day beavers, and experiments have found that this is much less efficient for cutting down trees. It would take Dipoides several bites to accomplish what modern beavers can do with a single bite. Secondly, studies of the diet of Castoroides, the massive bear-sized beavers, suggest that it mostly ate aquatic plants, with little to no evidence of consuming woody shrubs or tree bark. This strongly implies that Castoroides did not have the woodcutting behavior that Dipoides and modern beavers do. It is extremely hard to study a behavior in an extinct species, but it is highly interesting that some species had it, while others did not, especially since Dipoides and Castoroides are more closely related to each other than either of them are to the modern beavers. Finally, we come to Castoridae, or the modern beavers. The most well-known extinct member of this family is Steneofiber. These were much smaller than modern beavers, being about 30 centimeters or 1 foot long. It is the oldest confirmed semi-aquatic beaver, living around 23 million years ago. It is assumed that older species may have also been semi-aquatic, but this is confirmed in Steneofiber because they have combing claws, which are used by modern beavers to make their fur waterproof. Steneofiber is believed to have been less aquatic than modern beavers as they still lived in burrows. These burrows were always near a water source, and so they likely did still have a semi-aquatic lifestyle. There is no evidence that they could cut down trees, again raising the question of how that behaviour evolved, as it is such an odd behaviour that it is unlikely to have evolved twice, once for the modern beavers and once in Dipoides. The modern beavers are all in the genus Castor. There are several extinct species in this genus, the oldest of which dates back 12 to 10 million years ago. These oldest fossils strongly support the fact that the genus originated in Europe and Asia. Genetic testing suggests that the two living species, the Eurasian and North American beavers, shared a common ancestor about 8 million years ago. This would then mean that the beavers crossed the Bering Land Bridge between Siberia and Alaska around 7.5 million years ago. The most recent, and consequently most well known, of the extinct beavers in this genus is the Californian beaver, Castor californicus, which lived between 2 million to 700,000 years ago. There is some evidence that the Californian beaver is the direct ancestor of the North American beaver. While that makes some sense, given that beavers originated on another continent, it does mean that there is some doubt as to whether they should be considered a separate species, or if it is just natural variation over time in a single species. Natural variation over time just sounds like a definition of evolution to me, so I'm going to leave the discussion of that there, as it could get very technical very quickly with trying to decide when something has changed enough to be considered a new species. While there are many more extinct genera of beaver, it is time to move on to the species still alive today. But before doing that, I want to spend some time on their most iconic behaviour, dam building. At the very start of this video, I called beavers engineers. This was used because it is a scientific term, as beavers are one of the best examples of ecosystem engineers. This is a species that significantly changes or modifies its habitat. The term is general enough that it could apply to many different plants and animals. For example, on a large scale, trees and corals modify the habitat just by being there. But on a much smaller scale, woodpeckers, for example, can create holes in trees for them to nest, which can then be used later by other birds or mammals, and so may still classify as an ecosystem engineer. However, beavers are the original example, and are still the best showcase of the term. We have already talked a little about it, but beavers use their teeth to cut down trees. They then use these fallen trees, along with mud, to build a dam in a river. This dam has several purposes. The first is to lessen the flow of the water, essentially creating their own pond. The dam also houses the lodge where the beavers live, acting as protection from predators and the weather. They always have at least one underwater entrance, which helps to keep the lodge safe from predators. Their construction is quite intricate, with 2 platforms above the surface of the water. The first of these is used for drying off, and the second one is where they spend most of their time in the lodge. They leave a small hole at the top of the lodge to ensure that there is always a supply of air, even when the mud that the lodge is constructed out of freezes, a process which would make the entire structure as solid as concrete. Despite essentially altering the natural course of streams, studies have shown that beaver dams drastically increase the biodiversity of the area, as the newly created wetland habitat is perfect for many different species. Fish like trout and salmon can use the pond as a nursery, while also creating habitat for amphibians, birds and insects. There are many other benefits of beaver dams too. They help to store the water and may prevent streams from going dry during the summer. They have also been proven to improve water quality. They do this by filtering out excess nutrients in the water, such as the phosphorus and nitrogen runoff often caused by farming. Just like human dams, beaver dams can also prevent flooding downstream. They can also help to prevent the spread of forest fires. As you can tell from this quick list, beaver dams have many benefits for the environment, for the surrounding forest, the waterway, and the animals found in the area. Beavers don't just build dams, they are also known for building canals. They do this to expand the range of their waterways, so they can access resources while minimizing the amount of time they spend on land. In drier areas, these can be used to link separate bodies of water together to form an extensive network of ponds and canals. Beavers also use canals as a transport system to float logs back to their dam instead of needing to drag them over land. They construct these canals by digging, which is an interesting throwback to their prehistoric ancestors, although modern-day beavers use their forepaws and not their teeth for this. There are two species of living beaver, so we will start with the Eurasian one, Castoridae. This is found throughout much of Europe, with isolated populations in part of Asia. Due to its patchy range, a lot of subspecies have been proposed, but genetic testing does not support this, so it is commonly accepted that it has no subspecies. By average weight, the Eurasian beaver is the second largest rodent in the world, only after the capybara. However, to get that statistic, you do need to specify average weight. This is because the North American beaver, while on average smaller, does have a larger range of potential sizes and weights, so could also be argued as the second largest rodent. The Eurasian beaver has a head and body length of 80 to 100 centimeters or 31 to 39 inches long, with their tail being an additional 25 to 50 centimeters or 10 to 20 inches. Their coat has regional variations in color, but these are all shades of brown, whether pale, reddish or dark. Their tail is large and flat, as it is used to help them swim, and their hind feet are webbed. Beavers have unusual reproduction habits when compared to most rodents. They have one litter per year, and the females go into estrus for only 12 to 24 hours, typically in January. They are monogamous, with pairs remaining together for multiple years. Gestation lasts for 107 days, and they can have 2 to 6 kits per litter. Most beavers reach sexual maturity at 3 years old, although a few females can reach this when they are only 2 years old. While the Eurasian beaver is today listed by the IUCN as least concern, that was not always the case. At the start of the 1900s, there were only an estimated 1,200 individuals left after the species had been almost hunted to extinction. They were a hunting target due to their fur and castoreum. Castoreum is a chemical that beavers produce to mark their territory. However, humans have also found it useful for medicines, perfumes, and as an additive in some foods, so, due to its rarity, it was very valuable for those able to acquire it. Due to this, it is extirpated in some countries that it could previously be found in, such as Turkey, Portugal, and Moldova. However, other countries where it was extirpated have had dedicated reintroduction attempts to try and reestablish beaver populations. And for once, I have some good news. Many of these have been extremely successful. In the last 100 years, Eurasian beavers have increased from around 1,200 in the early 20th century to 640,000 in 2006, and today that number is expected to be nearer 1 million beavers, although there are no more recent population estimates that I could find. This is an incredible success story, and countries like Spain, France, and the United Kingdom, where the beavers had gone extinct, now have beavers again. Their stronghold is still in Eastern Europe, however, in Germany, Ukraine, Russia, and Norway. Unfortunately, most of the Asian populations have not recovered as well, and so its distribution is still patchy across China and Mongolia, where it used to be common. The earliest attempts to protect the Eurasian beavers was in the Soviet Union, with the establishment of the Voronezh Nature Reserve in 1923. This was extremely effective, and from 1934 to 1977, over 3,000 beavers from this nature reserve were used to bolster wild populations of beavers from Poland to Mongolia. Today, the beavers are protected across much of their range. Despite these conservation efforts for decades, some of the laws protecting beavers were only enacted surprisingly recently. For example, England only passed a law to protect them in 2022, despite the first reintroductions occurring in England in 2008. The other living species is the North American beaver, Castor canadensis. As this name suggests, they can be found throughout most of North America, from northern Mexico to near the Arctic Circle in Canada. There are also invasive populations of them in Chile and Argentina, and another in Finland. The Finnish population was deliberately introduced to bolster the Eurasian beaver population, as, at the time, they were believed to be the same species. Now that the two are recognised as separate, these beavers in Finland are now considered invasive. The South American beavers were part of a commercial fur operation in the 1940s, but when that failed, 25 mated pairs were released into the wild, resulting in the modern-day population far outside of their native range. As such an iconic North American animal, they have been better studied than the Eurasian cousins, so a lot more is known about them, although it is assumed that much of this information is true for both species. At one time, it was believed that there were as many as 25 subspecies of North American beaver, which were distinguished due to slight variations in appearance and colour. More recently, genetic testing has proven that this is incorrect. The North American beaver has no subspecies, and the slight morphological differences observed is simply variation within a single species. Beavers are mostly nocturnal, and are very vulnerable to predation when on land. As a result, they try to spend as much time as possible in the water, and they can hold their breath for up to 15 minutes. Their large flat tail serves several purposes. It stores fat, when food is plentiful, to help the beavers get through winter. Its main purpose is to help the beavers swim, along with its webbed feet. And when beavers sense danger, they will use their tail to warn others by slapping it on the surface of the water. Beaver fur is a double coat, made of fine inner hairs, but with coarser outer hairs, and they keep this coat waterproof by grooming themselves with the Castoroides they produce. Like their Eurasian counterparts, North American beavers were driven almost to the point of extinction due to the popularity of their fur and for Castoroides. It is speculated that beavers only avoided extinction because beaver fur went out of fashion before the species was completely eradicated. Today, beavers are once again common and are listed by the IUCN as least concern. Beavers have highly advanced social behaviours, especially for a rodent. They live together in family groups. They mate for life, with the pair living in their lodge with their kits. Kits typically remain with their parents until they are 2 years old, at which point they will leave to find a mate and build their own lodge. It is believed that young beavers remain in the family home for so long to learn the skills required to build and maintain a dam. They express adult behaviours long before they leave, so do not need to be looked after for such a long period of time. They communicate with each other using scent marking, vocalizations, and tail slapping. While, for the most part, I have been treating North American and Eurasian beavers as very similar, if not identical, in their appearance and behaviours, they do have some important differences. One of the most crucial is that the two species are not able to interbreed with each other. They have different numbers of chromosomes, with North American ones having 40 and Eurasian ones with 48. The reason for this is unknown, but of the more than 27 attempts that Russia made to interbreed the two species, only one female got pregnant, and that resulted in a stillbirth, so the two species are different enough that they cannot produce a hybrid. There are some visible differences between the two species as well. North American beavers are, on average, smaller, but they also show larger variation in size, so certain individuals can get much bigger than Eurasian beavers can. The shape of the heads and tails are different between the species, but these differences are subtle, so it can be tough to recognise if not comparing the two side by side. Another difference is the shape of their nostrils. North American ones are square, while Eurasian ones are triangular. This is an odd difference, and it is unknown if there is an advantage to one over the other, but it is interesting to note. There are many other minute differences between the two species, but that should give you some idea that they are distinct species even if they have very similar behaviours. I hope you enjoyed this video. Beavers are fascinating animals with their building habits that are truly unique in the animal kingdom. They are a keystone species for a reason, and benefit many of the flora and fauna that live alongside them. Thank you for listening, and feel free to suggest another group of animals you want to see me cover in the comments.